Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we go week to week breaking down a streaming favorite. In today's episode, Sona and I break down the first episode of the new Hulu series, Furious, from Liz Meriwether, starring Emmy Rossum and Lola Petticrew. After my conversation with Sona, stay tuned. I will have a relatively brief breakdown of episode 2 and 3 as well. There simply was not enough time. There's 3 episodes all dropping at once. But after this week, we will go week to week. This episode was supposed to come out much earlier in the week, by the way. But as is the case, just inevitably, when I'm trying to put out more than 2 episodes in a week, things just absolutely never work out. But luckily, this week, Darren and I will be discussing Lucky very soon after this publication, within the next 24 hours or so. Expect that episode to be published. And Sona and I wrap up the actual kind of shit show, although she's been enjoying it now towards the end, Apple TV series Cape Fear, which finally ends this week. And then we're down to 2 shows a week, which is much easier for me to handle. Darren, in our upcoming conversation, will also be touching base on other things we've been watching. And there's a lot of premieres on the way, probably in those upcoming conversations, touching on a bunch of things that'll be premiering in the very near term. August is upon us. Ted Lasso is coming. We'll definitely be discussing that here on the podcast. Lanterns is coming right around the time, actually, that maybe the exact same week that Lucky wraps up. We will start talking about Lanterns. But there's also an Australian thriller series that is coming to Apple TV that I'm going to surprise Darren with and see if he follows along with me. And that's even before some very high-profile premieres in September, and then a bunch of very high-profile premieres in October, which probably means we will start to be cramming more than 2 episodes per week. But for the time being, we'll be talking about the remaining 4 episodes of Lucky, wrapping up Cape Fear this week, and 5 more episodes of this series, Furious. I had originally announced that we were going to be talking about The Savant on Apple TV, which had been announced for July, and usually Apple has an overlapping week, the premiere and the ending of the previous high-profile series, which of course would be Cape Fear, but the announcement did not come, so I assume again The Savant has been delayed. But I promise, folks, when I have an official release date, I'll announce it again, and we will cover it here on the podcast if it's the last thing I do. The usual calls to action. Check out the show notes if you'd like to join our Patreon, which is currently free. There's a lot of bonus conversations there. Email us with any feedback, needsomeintroduction@gmail.com, or on Spotify or YouTube. Just put a comment under the episode. We always enjoy your feedback. And if you're curious about all the shows I just outlined and want some guidance through it all and some conversation tied into it, of course, subscribe so you know when all those episodes become available. Okay, let me get into my conversation with Sona, where we discuss the first episode of Furious, but then stay tuned because I will be giving you some of my thoughts on the second and third episode as well. Okay, Sona, so we are kicking off our new show called Furious. I had barely had this on my agenda. This comes from Liz Meriwether, by the way, Sona. So she
the creator of New Girl. When I Googled, which, so similar to this show.
Exactly. That's the irony of it. And so since then, of course, New Girl's hugely popular. And,
and it is great.
It is great. Yeah. And of course, a whole new generation of people. It is so massively popular on Netflix that, a whole new generation of younger folks have discovered the show there. And in recent years, she has pivoted away from being straight up comedy.
No kidding.
She did, but there's always comedy in her work, which I find very interesting. I never watched The Dropouts, although I'm a big fan of the star of that series, and also really interested in that story of the Theranos scam and Elizabeth Holmes in general. But I had already seen a documentary and already listened to a podcast, which was the seed for that. So I just didn't watch it, although the reviews were great. And I think it is available on Hulu, by the way. So if people want to keep going down this rabbit hole, I think you can watch it there. And it is a fascinating story. So, but I have not seen it, just to say that. But that was very popular and got a bunch of Emmy nominations. So then the next thing she made, Sona, is something I recommended to you, I think just a year ago, which was Dying for Sex, based on the podcast, which I thought was excellent and surprising. It was very funny and very emotional. And my wife cried multiple times watching that series.
Yeah, I heard good things about it. I never did get around to seeing it like so many other things, but I remember people saying it was really good.
So again, if you're just curious to see an odd tone, by the way, not the tone we have here, but the reason I want to bring that up is that there's some overlap between Dying for Sex in this series, which I'll get into a little bit, surprisingly, actually. And one of those things is that as dark, this series is really dark. And I know you've only seen episode 1. I saw episode 1 and 2 so far, but in episode 2, there are multiple times where I got like goose chills. And it's not because what we're seeing on the screen is so disturbing. It's just the implications of it is extremely disturbing. And yet, and here's what ties all these projects together, and yet there is room for sitcom levels of comedy sometimes, which I find intriguing that the comedy still breaks through. Much less so, by the way, even than Dying for Sex, which is mostly a comedy, surprisingly, but it is less so here. But I was surprised to see, especially like some of the banter is definitely, it reminds you of New Girl, but maybe this is the dark side of New Girl eventually.
Wow. Can you imagine?
This is where everybody landed.
What New Girl didn't talk about was the human trafficking that was going on the whole time.
That's right. Well, I thought the thing I was thinking about as tying things together here was seeing Scoot McNairy here after we just saw Gone Girl again. And I'm just like, maybe 10 years after Gone Girl, he's able to get a job with the police department. And this is where he ended up. And he's on his best behavior, of course, considering his previous antics in that movie. But I thought this probably hit some sweet spots for you. We're in New York. There's a legal angle to it. Female creator, obviously female focused with the protagonist and antagonist here. And who are those? Who is the antagonist? Who's the protagonist? So I thought that would be something that would appeal to you. A thriller, of course, which you always like, a psychological thriller. And and of course, I thought another thing that might hit your sweet spot is you have an actual platonic relationship between a man and a woman, which I know you always complain that there's not enough of those. So all that is to say, episode 1 called The Gorgon. And we just looked this up moments before, by the way. We're not that smart, everybody. We just looked it up minutes before we started recording that the Gorgons were the 3 sisters, including Medusa. And we have a Medusa story here. So, of course, the Gorgon is the vengeful Medusa-like woman at the center of the story here. And with all that preamble out of the way, Sona, what did you think of this episode?
I really am fascinated by this show so far. I know I'm only 1 episode in, and there are 3 available, you said, right?
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to watching the others, but you had sent me the preview clip, I don't know, a week ago, a week before that, maybe. And I think I just responded back to you, whoa, because it seemed super intense. And I was a little bit concerned that it might be too much for me, like just a little bit too dark and grim. And I think it is dark and grim, don't get me wrong. But I really am enjoying the characters that we have met so far and the way they've been developed. And just, I'm really looking forward to learning more about the characters and about the underlying mystery that's happening here. It really hooked me, this first episode.
Yeah, this was, I agree, was like really impressive, even in episode 1, and really striking, like immediately that the very first moments for people who haven't seen this, we are going to spoil the full episode 1, by the way. And in the rest of this episode, by the way, Sona's only seen 1 episode. I've seen 2. I do plan to watch all 3 and do like a plot breakdown. But for this conversation, we're only spoiling episode 1, but we might as well just spoil it from the very beginning. But for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, the opening sequence, the antagonist dressed as a cat, and which speaks to the whole idea of when we watch these type of mystery shows, it's a cat and a mouse. So the cop, when you say cat and mouse, it usually means that the cat is the police trying to track down the perpetrator of the crime. But here we have who is the cat and who is the mouse here, because our antagonist is indeed the wearing a cat mask. And this very grim, but really just a stunning shot in New York City, by the way. So as you can probably
gorgeous
tell.
Brownstone. Yeah,
amazing brownstone. And just this beautiful, I mean, just the way this is lit, the way she's like backlit on the stairs, and the neighbor's house has like this red light. It's just very evocative, like really beautifully. The cinematography is really impressive in this series so far. So top aces across the board from the perspective of technically the performances, of course, as well. Emmy Rossum is the police officer in this cat and mouse question mark. As to who's the cat and who's the mouse. And the Gorgon is played by this actress who I really haven't seen in anything before. Her name is, it's a very British name, Lola Petticrew. And what'd you think about all the performances, just to start there?
So I am not familiar with Lola Pettigrew that I know of anyway. I'm not necessarily the best with identifying actors and actresses, but I really was drawn into her performance. I feel like her character has an earnestness that's really appealing, even though it is at time a fake earnestness, right? In fact, maybe every single time I've seen her, she's been being fake. She's always pretending to be someone that she isn't, pretty much. But there is something really, I'm trying to find another synonym for earnest, I guess, but she draws you in. I can see how she's hooking these guys. What did you think?
I thought she was great. And oh my God, I did recognize her face and didn't place her, especially because of this wig she's wearing the whole entire time. But of course, I literally just clicked on her to look at her resume. And the thing she's been in most recently was another thing that was in my top 10 list last year, which was the adaptation of the novel Say Nothing, the biographical book about the Irish the troubles in Ireland and the end of that whole era in the 70s, etc. And she, of course, is one of the two sisters. The story is told basically through the story of these two diverging biographies of these two sisters, and she's one of the main players. And I didn't even recognize her. But by the way, I just want to shout out the fact that she is exceptional in that. And I think really stand out at this moment.
Well, she is wearing a wig here in your defense.
Yes, I think the wig did throw me off a little bit, but only partially, because I do think she has kind of a reddish tint to her hair. So that was my bad. I'm not recognizing her right away. But yes, and by the way, that's on Hulu too, everybody. So you guys have a lot to put onto your watch list if you want to just start throwing some Hulu stuff on.
Get your money's worth from the subscription.
That's true. You know what? Anyway, Susie, for example, just emailed us saying that she's going to have to like renew her Disney Plus because she just let it expire. But I guess she's going to have to keep it going for this. It's just like, hey, Susie, while you're watching this, also check out, Say Nothing.
Max it out. Yeah.
And check out Dying for Sex. If that it's all available on Hulu and all great stuff. And Emmy Rossum, of course, who I know primarily from Shameless. Of course, that's probably the thing she's most famous for. What do you think about her? She's playing the FBI agent Alice Black, who at the beginning of the series is working this really terrible job of hearing just whoever calls the hotline for the FBI. And no one likes her. She has left her job. We find out more about this over time. And I'll let you take the lead on that because I don't know how much you know based on episode 1 and episode 2.
Can't remember where it stops. And
exactly. I'm not sure how much you're supposed to know at this moment. So
I had that problem with our Cape Fear discussion the other week. So I got it. Yeah. So we learn here in this episode that she was previously with the police department. She had a police officer boyfriend who was violent with her.
Who's Jake Lacey, by the way? I don't know if you met him in episode 1, but that's who it is.
I don't think we met him, but then I was just Googling the cast because I'm so bad at keeping track of character names and I retain none of it. So I'm just going to call her Emmy Rossum. But I saw that he is playing the boyfriend, but I don't think we've met him yet in this episode. But so apparently she missed a few days of work because I'm assuming she was physically bruised and battered. And now she has moved over to the FBI and the police officers are kind of holding a grudge on her leaving, even though I think her friend in the police department that she's working with here has kind of told them the circumstances, but I guess it's like a blue wall type of situation.
Yeah, I don't think you've seen this in episode 1, but it's not a spoiler, so I'll tell you anyway. But there's a really fantastic scene between the two of them where he basically tells her, I had your back when you left and you didn't even go to internal affairs. And I believed what you said, but now you don't call me anymore. and everybody I used to hang out with at the police department doesn't talk to me anymore anyway. So he's just basically very frustrated that he's like had her back and he's getting nothing from her
like
now.
A pariah. Yeah.
And then meanwhile, because he took her side, is also a pariah at work. So it's just like, I got nothing out of this.
Yeah, she didn't follow through on, looking out for herself, really.
And it's a terrific scene between the two of them. So something to look forward to when we get to
I actually find Emmy Rossum very likable. I really only know her from Shameless before this. I will say, and I think this is why I said I actually find, do you know she has a reputation for being very unpleasant in person?
I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I haven't heard it in a while, but I know around the time of Shameless, there were a lot of people that said she was very unlikable in reality. Is it true or not? I have no idea. I do think she has an amazing head of hair, and I am so envious of it. Very, if nothing else, she's beautiful, but I do enjoy her as an actress.
And her husband is Sam Esmail, by the way, the director who made like Mr. Robots and Leave the World Behind, which we talked about here, the Julia Roberts blockbuster from Netflix a few years back. And what we're seeing over the course of this first episode is this parallel story, right? So a couple of things that we start to understand even more so in episode 2 is that both of these women have had abuse in the past. So they have a shared drive that may drive them together or drive them apart. Way too early to tell on the show. But what did you think about what the show is trying to explore about these women who are potentially victims of abuse in the past and how they're trying to negotiate this? Obviously very unhealthy to, let's circle back to that very first scene in the show, which is so memorable, by the way. But this beautiful scene, she's on the stoop wearing a mask. We find out, by the way, that no one ever really sees her because she's wearing a mask, still wearing a mask outside post-COVID, but a lot of people still wear masks, especially when the air quality is not very good, like it's been recently, by the way. And then you have her wearing a mask, of course, again, hiding her face, but being out in public and hiding her face. So this is a place where it's an interesting idea that, this is, they say in popular culture that Halloween's when like the monsters can be out in public because they blend in with everybody in their costumes, right? So here she is outside able to wear a mask conveniently. So she's probably at her most relaxed. And this child approaches and she's like, let me give you some candy. And she goes and gets a bunch of
bananas.
A bunch of, candy corn unwrapped, as if this girl herself would have ever eaten any unwrapped candy, especially given her background.
Bananas, but I did like that the show was realistic about the mom saying, we're not taking any unwrapped candy today.
By the way, I have gone trick-or-treating with my daughter when she was very little. I don't trick-or-treat her anymore. Actually, we do. We kind of hang back and let her hang out with her friends. But we used to obviously go much more helicopter parents when she was very small. And there were occasionally the times where someone would give like a handful of candy corn. And for so many reasons.
Are you kidding me? Not even, sometimes they bag it up and it's like, well, I still know you touched a lot of this candy corn before you put it in the bag. But sometimes they at least put it in a bag. I can't imagine just a bowl of loose candy corn.
I have seen loose candy corn at the bottom of the bag. But yes, definitely sometimes just in the little baggie. But whether it's in the bag or out, when we unpack, we politely take it. And then when we get home, it goes right into the trash.
I am one of those people, and I think I'm in the minority, that loves candy corn. But even I would not eat the loose candy corn from a stranger.
I do not like candy corn, but my wife, Kim, who's been on the podcast here, she loves candy corn. And she likes when it gets like hard and stale.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I got
your preference too?
I will eat it in any form. I think there's something to appreciate when it's fresh out of the bag. And I think there's something to appreciate when it's a little bit stale. What I don't like is when it's that fake chocolate part on the bottom. I think they call it Indian corn. That is where I draw the line.
Yeah, not a fan of that either. I also don't like when it's like very humid and then it starts getting like
melty,
like tacky on the outside.
That's no good.
When it's surrounding, they start sticking together. I don't like.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
But in October, it's usually that the opposite happens. The air is dry and they get hard.
It's candy corn season.
Exactly.
That's when candy corn is in season. It's at its freshest.
And this sequence culminates with this man who's inside the house. We've seen him. We open on him like trying to crawl out of the bedroom. He's drugged. I don't think we have any specifics on what she's using to drug these guys, but she obviously drugs them and keeps them fully or nearly fully incapacitated. They're not fully incapacitated, though. Notice that multiple times. You probably haven't seen this part yet, but in episode 2, there's someone else wriggling around as well. But so I guess that's what she knows. They need another shot.
Right. Well, it's fentanyl in the first episode. They showed the label. So
that's okay.
Yeah. So I assume that's what it is, but she could be switching it up.
Well, the fentanyl, I assume the fentanyl was what does him in at the end, but I would assume it's a little dangerous to just give him fentanyl on the regular. So I'm not sure how that works.
I don't know. I mean, this is a whole other tangent, but I mean, I think people do take forms of fentanyl and survive just fine. I think there's a...
Just fine?
No, well, for a fentanyl user.
That is Russian roulette. But.
I mean, I don't think it's... I am so hesitant to go down this road, but I think it's like an urban myth that if you just touch fentanyl, something terrible is going to happen to you. Like, I think you do have to intentionally consume it in some way.
Oh, I do.
Like, it's not so lethal that, you know what I'm saying? Yes. Like, you hear those stories of like, they looked at fentanyl and now they're in the hospital. Like, I don't think that's a real thing. Yes. I could be wrong.
Yes, we have no personal experience.
Yes, I have no way to know.
but the reason I say that it seems to be risky for her to experiment with that is because, of course, it's exactly how you described. People would, for example, expect heroin. They'll expect heroin. Not that anyone should be injecting heroin either, or morphine or something. And then because it's diluted with, it's a much higher dose than they would.
But this had like a pharmaceutical label on it, if I remember correctly.
So maybe she's
like
very
properly dosing. Yeah,
she's properly dosing.
RN. Have we thought about this?
I don't. I'm pretty sure she's not RN by the time we find out in episode 2.
Okay.
But it is. But yeah, so she knows what she's doing.
Google it. The proper dose of fentanyl to just incapacitate someone but not kill them. You could probably Google that. I'm not going to.
I mean, I'm shocked by that. Like, you know, again, because fentanyl has this negative, but my wife was just talking about a patient. She was talking about the treatment for a patient just while she was doing errands around the house and she was on her headphones. And she's talking about giving the patient fentanyl. Yeah. And then when she was off the call, I'm like, you give patients fentanyl? And she goes like, yeah, it's within the hospital. This is, of course. But I'm like, I guess you can have a safe dose of fentanyl, but
highly regulated.
It's such a boogeyman nowadays. You just assume like if you inject it, you die.
Exactly.
It's just how it works.
Exactly. I know people were talking, we're really getting far afield here. So this is the last thing I'll say because it's not even fentanyl related anymore. But there's this thing now of people taking, I might say it wrong, propofol for their anxiety. Like before they have to give a speech. And in my head, I'm like, that's what killed Michael Jackson. You can't just take that because you get stressed out about public speaking. You have stage fright. I mean, but apparently when you dose things properly, it's not so dangerous.
And you also get acclimate to it. So I'm sure like, on a regular basis, like what someone can take on, on the regular is dependent on what their tolerance is to it initially anyway. Anyway, that's our digression on the proper use of fentanyl.
Yeah. Thanks for everyone who was able to sit through that. Yeah.
So if your AI is transcribing and summarizing this, you'll probably get something like, take a little fentanyl before, if you're going to give a speech in public. And we do not stand behind that AI summary.
Or really any medication recommendations whatsoever.
Exactly.
We are not qualified in any way, shape, or form.
We are not professionals. And, but yeah, this sequence here culminates with her giving him that overdose on the stairs. And tell me your read of this, because it's not clear yet, although there are more details than you've seen about what her history is and how she's connected to these men. But there seems to be an interesting psychological element here where she's not like a vicious murderess who's trying to just punish these people. She has infiltrated their lives, right? She was a
They think she's the
considered
girlfriend. Yeah.
right. She was considered the girlfriend. She introduced her. People met her. Very small number of them. He seems to be like a recluse, and I'm sure she targets people like this. But his family thought about her as the girlfriend. The neighbors said he had a girlfriend, right? So apparently she was known in the neighborhood. I'm sure she just walked in and out running errands, etc. So it's interesting that she has infiltrated his life, and there seems to be still some aspect of it, even here in the final moments, that there's some connection that she's trying to work out her psychological drama with this person who she correctly or incorrectly, and that's part of what we'll discover over the course of the show, she blames for her abuse. And it is it's part of what makes it so chilling, right? She's not just like, haha, I got you, I'm gonna murder you now. There seems to be like a tenderness to it. Like she's like, I loved your smile, but I didn't like how you did this. It's almost like she's having this final she's breaking up basically, right? And but it's a final, as final as it can be. Is this how you usually break up with your exes?
With a fentanyl overdose. I mean, I understand wanting to go no contact, but that seems a little extreme.
It's a permanent no contact. And of course, we see some other main players here. We already mentioned her ex-partner, who very early on, she gets called back. She has a terrible relationship, I assume, because this is my guess, that it is reputationally, it has come from her previous work. Her boss is a real jerk. Do you think that's just because he hates women? Or do you think that has something to do with the fact that he, maybe he doesn't want to show any kind of friendliness to her? If theoretically, sometimes, you probably speak to this more than I can, but sometimes women have a certain reputation of like, if I am nice to her at all, she's going to take it the wrong way and report me to HR. So do you think there's some aspect of that, or what do you think they're trying to convey with her relationship there with the men she works with?
I don't think we know enough yet in this first episode, but I'm thinking it is probably multiple layers of things that women deal with in the workplace fairly regularly.
Did you
and her history, of course, that everyone seems to know her history, even though she hates it that everybody knows her history.
And so actually I was going to have this as a disclaimer on every episode we do here, but I'm going to ask you anyway. But the disclaimer here is that Sona lives in New York City. So I definitely want to get her feedback on the show shot in New York, which she always loves, for anybody who's new to the podcast. And also a lawyer, although this is not the kind of law she is involved with.
All.
So the disclaimer that none of this, Sona is a lawyer, but none of this has anything to do with her legal expertise.
It's as good as my prescription medication advice, basically, my legal opinions outside of my field.
And I did want to preface that, like on every episode of the show, because there are a bunch of legal questions I have given when they start getting into how this investigation, the initial investigation, went forward, and the relationship between like how much power the judge had in the continued investigation, etc. So there's a lot of legal questions I'm going to ask, but with the assumption that your legal expertise will not be helpful.
You're talking to maybe a half step above a lay person. Yeah.
Good. So just to be clear about that. But the one thing I did want to bring your personal biography into is you're somebody, especially since you've been doing your job for a little while, you're
yeah, a long time.
So question is, especially a generation ago or half a generation ago, that, when you went into the legal field, do you empathize with kind of like coming into like a boys club where the boys have their boy language and they do their boy, and then all of a sudden, like these ladies hanging around, making things uncomfortable for us?
I have always been in the boys club, and to this day, I'm in the boys club because my particular field is very male dominated. I could go on forever about this, but I won't because I've already taken up so much time with fentanyl and propofol. But it is something that is very difficult. Just within the last 6 months, I've said to my husband, working in the plaintiff's bar as I do, which is very male dominated and also very not diverse ethnically, It's like every single day, all day, I am swimming upstream and also trying to stay relevant. So it's very much the thing of being twice as good to get half as much. With the thing where, and women in corporate America have this all the time. I'm not saying anything groundbreaking, where you say something and nobody really makes any comment about it. And then 15 minutes later, a man says it. And hey, that's a great idea. Why didn't we ever think of that? It's a lot. And it's also a lot of pressure when you're the only woman and only non-white person on a team to make everything you say count, because you feel like you're already starting with a couple strikes against you. There's a lot. It's a lot of baggage. It's a lot to deal with. It can be very exhausting. Some days are better than others. Some days I say, and my husband's heard me say it more than once, one day women are going to burn it all down and you will have deserved it. So yeah, I get it. And that's not nearly my work, listen, it's primarily paperwork. It's not close to the heart the way the issues that the show is discussing are.
Yeah, and this is all grim stuff, especially when you consider the fact that so much of police work, and by the way, you said you didn't want to take additional space. I actually asked that question very pointedly for the fact that I think that it is something that you are going to circle back to one way or the other as we continue to discuss this show, because it is thematically what the show is about, right? It's about the fact that
I love it. Yes.
You have a bunch of men primarily that are working in this police department and in the judicial system itself. And they are looking the other way because this might embarrass one of my friends. And now I'll just kind of lay it out there. It's not overt yet in episode 2, although I think it's already hinted at all the way back in episode 1 that what we're seeing here is this woman was a victim of some kind of organized sex trafficking, and that this could go very high up. And we can't watch this show, whether it overtly references it or not, and not think about the Epstein case, for example. And I don't know, and then correct me if I'm wrong or not, but there are already hints in episode 1, given the connection between these two very different men, that this is, a cabal of conspirators. Now, what's interesting about it, and we can talk about it after you see episode 2, is the question as to, and this could be, again, what the show is about. There's a version of this where it's a cabal of people like in the Stanley Kubrick movie. What am I trying to say? The Tom Cruise movie, the
Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut, of course, where it's like, there's an actual, clique of powerful people who are meeting behind closed doors. Like a club, yeah. And it's an actual, right, exactly. Like the nightmare scenario of going to a private island, like the Epstein stories, investigations. But there's a version of this where it's just people looking the other way. It's just people accepting things. And in a way, it becomes its own conspiracy, but it's not a conspiracy of cloaked club members. It's a conspiracy of just, hey, we all bend the rules a little bit. Hey, we all like to have something on the side. Yeah, maybe she was a little too young. And then just a lot of that becomes collectively a form of abuse. So I think it's interesting that the show hasn't put its thumb yet on exploring whether this is, although I do feel like it's probably, also because it's TV, it probably is going to be some kind of organized group of people. But it's interesting that at this point, it could just be happenstance, but collectively it is still creating the same effect, right?
Yeah, there's this idea, maybe you've heard it, the bystander versus the upstander, where it's very easy to be a bystander and you haven't technically done anything wrong, but your silence makes you complicit. So you really have an obligation to be an upstander rather than just a bystander. The way I hear it most often, which is a much different context, right, than what we're talking about, is for kids with bullying that, your kid might not be the bully, but he heard the bully say the thing that they recognized as bullying and they just wanted to stay out of it, understandably, right? But that makes them a bystander. And really, they should be an upstander. And if they feel like someone's being picked on, they should speak up on behalf of that person. But it's a big ask of a child, and it's a big ask of an adult sometimes too, depending on the context.
Yeah, and I think that is part of what we see even, again, correct me if I'm wrong if this is not in episode 1, but I'm pretty sure it is. But when the Scoot McNairy character, I'm going to call them by their, I'm not familiar with the character names yet.
I know. I Googled the cast and I still am. Yeah.
So, except for the Officer Black, Alice Black. But other than her, I pretty much don't know. But
I didn't even know that one.
We'll get there over the course of
Yes, we always do by the end.
But they go and
Danny, by the way, Scott McNairy is Danny.
Oh, there you go. Scoot McNairy, actually.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Strange first name. Scott would be a more standing first name.
Yes, I guess that's why my brain just changed it to Scott.
But but then when they go and question the investigator from the previous case, who Danny knows, that he immediately is apologetic, like saying like that happened a long time ago, this, and all these other things, but immediately apologetic because they know that they didn't fully investigate. They know that they're just like, well, maybe some cops got caught up in this thing too. Like maybe it's somebody we knew. Maybe someone told us to look the other way. So they know they kind of did something wrong. And it seems like just a little slight, right? But of course, that's what's interesting about it, right? Like this is like the chickens coming home to roost, that this vengeful woman is all the looking the other way has wrought this vengeance on them, right? And that's the Medusa metaphor.
Right. Love a good Greek mythology reference.
Oh, and of course, how could I forget? Hey, not only is his name Danny, it's Danny like O'Flanagan or something, because someone makes fun of how Irish his name is later on.
Oh, I missed that.
No, I think it's in episode 2. I won't spoil the joke because it's very fun.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Oh, what did you make of this clue that we see right early on? Forgot about this until this moment, that he brings her in to start this investigation. They're looking around for any kind of clues. The bathroom's been cleaned thoroughly, but we have the edge of the door. The door is like a pocket door that has been clawed open.
Yeah.
And then we see the same thing at the other, at the previous crime scene, right? So I'm like, well, that's a weird motif to have in both locations. I mean, I guess he's doing that when he's clawing his way out.
I think that's the idea. Yeah. But I also, what I thought you were going to say, and maybe you picked up on this and I wasn't able to figure it out. What was that little metal round thing that she picked up off the floor?
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't think it's going to pay off considering how innocuous it is, but it's a sequin from her clothes.
Oh, thank you.
I guess the only thing that would be a clue for is that maybe they weren't looking for a woman, but of course now they definitely are looking for a woman anyways.
Right. Okay.
Speaking of looking for a woman, I do like the fact that there's the whole here's where the comedy comes in. I love when they go to question the next door neighbor who's on the security camera.
Oh my God. I love this, especially because this is one of my little bugaboos. You can't see somebody's vagina. I mean, maybe in a very special situation, but just from a woman walking around without her clothes on, you cannot see her vagina. I am with that neighbor kid. He is right. And I am impressed that he knew the proper terminology, even though his dad was horrified.
I like he's like, he just needs to make a phone call immediately.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with that.
He's very concerned about the direction the conversation is about. But yeah, that was very fun. Very funny. And that's like just a moment of this levity that comes in. And it just surprises you repeatedly in my watching of the show, where there's just kind of like this comedic aside just in the moment. And in the middle of this like, extremely grim investigation.
Well, I hope also a teaching moment, because really way too many people say that they can see someone else's vagina when they can't.
Yeah, you really can't. Unless
it's just a vulva.
Unless you brought equipment with you.
Right.
It's just a vulva.
Or, I mean, in a very graphic position, maybe.
Let's make a t-shirt. Everybody make a t-shirt for the show. It's just a vulva. Need some introduction. It's just a vulva.
It's just a vulva.
What did you make of her improvisation here? Apparently, we assume that she's living off the grid. And now, instead of saying her, I got to look up her character name.
Catherine is what online says. But Ginny is the name that the persona she's trying to adopt, right?
Catherine, Cat. Oh, Cat.
Mm.
I like that. Yes, so she is playing this role. She goes to a shelter. Interesting that she's like weaponizing the whole idea of having this shelter, which of course she has probably used in the past, given the fact of her own biography. But she steals someone else's identity, uses that to get into a shelter anonymously. Her identity is protected, and even starts this flirtation with the woman who runs the facility as a way to get even a little bit extra help when she needs it.
I'm sorry. Was there a question that I missed?
Oh, more like just what did you think of
okay.
her savviness, but also it's kind of like it in a way, it shows these organizations, which obviously are very beneficial in a potentially it's a vector for a criminal to hide in plain sight.
I thought I was very proud of myself when she was chasing Ginny on the street and saying, hit me, hit me. I thought I had figured out, she wants to look bruised up so she can go to a domestic violence shelter. But then when she showed up at the shelter, she didn't seem to have any bruises.
You really couldn't see the bruises, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if that was a necessary step for her. But I did think I appreciated that to say it's a clever idea, it makes it feel like I'm making light of it. But it's a good strategy, I think, to kind of become nameless, faceless, just blend into the background until you can kill again.
No, I think it's super villain stuff. I think it's very clever, but it is an unexpected way for them to use that. It actually made me think of something that I think is also available on Hulu. Have you seen this? It's Relay. Have you seen this movie, Relay?
No, I haven't heard of it.
With what's his name? With Riz Ahmed.
No, I've been meaning to watch Beat with Riz Ahmed, but let's not go down that road right now.
I saw it. I didn't love it, but the ending's not great. The rest of it's very good. The end is not. But Relay is really interesting. Relay is, speaking of what we're talking about now, that it is Riz Ahmed is allowing people to become whistleblowers for these corporations they work at. And the way he's able to pass information secretly between his sources and himself without anyone being able to get their hands on it is by using a relay for people who have hearing disabilities. Oh. And there's like a law where nothing that, as part of this relay system, nothing that is transcribed can be preserved or given over. So like the bad guys, the government, these corporations are all trying to get their hands on this information and they cannot get their hands on it. And it's just like, he has found this little loophole in society to be able to do this communication. And it's very clever. It's a pretty good movie. That movie, and this is the aside, I loved the first 2/3 of that movie. I thought it was so smart and like gave you insight into a whole subculture of the America you don't even know about. And I thought the ending was not bad, but just generic. And but the first 2/3, I was like, wow, this is a great movie. And then I got to the end and like, it was just the good kind of lackluster ending. I still recommend it. And Rizzo, that's great. Okay, back to this show. What do you make about her relationship with her sister? And of course, even in episode 2, so not giving away too much detail here, even there, we still don't know exactly what had kept her distant from her sister for so long. But what do you make about her sister's trying to include her in this conversation with her bridesmaids? Obviously, a very important moment for her sister. And what do you think about this like introductory moment between them?
Yeah, I think it's just showing the disconnect between the two sisters and where they are in life and their general personas. Is clearly Emmy Rossum's character, Alice, I'm getting there, is a much more buttoned up, serious person than her sister. And even the sister's friend is trying to make a joke about, do you have a gun? And she's actually, I have two,
I have two. Exactly. I got my main gun and my backup. Always.
Yeah, I think it just shows that they're sisters, but they're living in different worlds.
Well, they're very much in different worlds when you consider that her first date includes being strangled and beaten. And then she doesn't even go through with it. So this seems to be a pattern for her.
I mean, to the point that the mirror broke, they really took that seriously.
Yes. And by the way, in my reading of it, the mirror was already broken. So when did this happen previously? Is this just a regular routine for her?
Oh, you think it was already broken? Okay.
I don't think it happened in that moment because we didn't hear it break. So I'm like, this is just the last time she had a date.
I thought it was before we came in halfway through, I thought, so that the mirror had already broken. But yeah, either way it works.
This is maybe a little bit of what happens in episode 2. But I don't think I'm spoiling anything here because it's just speculation because it's not confirmed there either. But I do wonder if part of her shame and walking away from her job and not throwing her ex under the bus, I do wonder if, yes, she did end up injured in a particular instance, but whether it was this gone too far, because I do wonder if this is her kink. And that
I wondered if it predated the relationship with the police officer, or is it something like born out of that trauma? Right. That she's recreating the situation in a way that she can control it.
Exactly. And then I do wonder if what is going to be revealed over time is part of the reason she really hasn't thrown her ex under the bus is that maybe he took it too far. Maybe he even did it out of anger, but maybe it began consensually. And that's where she doesn't know how to explain that, right?
That's why you need a safe word.
That's for sure. We learned today, people. Number one,
I'm
fentanyl
about
can be a tool for good.
I am talking about all sorts of stuff that I have no reason to be talking about, as if like I know something about it. I do not.
You see the vulva, not the vagina.
That part I know.
That's a fact.
That's the one I stand behind out of all the things that I have said.
And number 3, you need a safe word. Those are the lessons of the day. So. Speaking of comedy again, by the way, I like the fact that she's masturbating after this didn't go exactly right. And but she suddenly has an inspiration for the investigation. It calls up her ex-partner and he's like, what's going on over there? It sounds like you're like running around outside. And she's like, oh, nothing.
You're in the forest trying to start a fire, he says.
It's an interesting. I'm not sure that's what I would have assumed.
But also, why would it sound like eating snacks, which is her response? No, I'm eating snacks. I'm eating goldfish.
Yes. People love snacks on this show. First of all, her go-to is goldfish. And this is another comedic beat that I actually really love. When she eventually goes to talk to that previous investigator from the previous crime, that who also becomes a much bigger part of the show, by the way, by episode 2. So there's a lot more of her. She's a fantastic character.
I expected that, yeah.
I wasn't sure. I thought like maybe she would just pop in here and there, but she's like a main character by episode 2. So, but it was the fact that the other woman who worked there telling her like she's going to be in a bad mood today because she's looking at child porn. It would ruin anybody's day for sure. And so she's like, she's not going to want to talk to you. But I like the fact that she's like, do you want cheese balls? Because I have cheese balls to snack on. So again, snacks, cheesy snacks, no less, right? Goldfish also. But then I love that she goes into the office eventually and talks to the former investigator. And behind her, they have like boxes of cheese balls. I'm just like, wow, these people love cheese balls. They got like crates of them in that office.
Well, but they're taking them out to talk to their like informant type people too.
Oh, that's true. I guess it's like to feed the girls.
They're kind of, giving them,
Can you get something better than cheese balls?
I like those. They tear apart the roof of your mouth though.
I know. And they're resilient though too, right? You can easy to keep around. Yeah. Although they may get they could get
stale. And you got to
stale too.
Yeah.
Especially those giant buckets. They definitely
the Costco size. Yeah. That's too many.
For sure. They need to get like if they're going to have a big crate of them, they need to get small ones to hand out to the girls in the streets.
Yeah.
So what else do we see? The investigation starts to unravel. I do like her with Daniel. Daniel? Is that his name?
Danny. Mm-hmm.
I like kind of seeing that relationship they have. She's eating his sandwich. I think she smells bad. I don't know if we got to that point. And of course, there's this weird connection between these two guys. The crime seems to be connected, seems to be these guys were scratching at doors, so both crawling around, probably severely drugged. One guy is a former drug dealer. The other one is a judge. And of course, as soon as you see how disparate those two jobs are, that it's like, oh, something happened to somebody on some case, and the revenge is for the initial perpetrator, perhaps, and all the people that allowed the abuse to continue or got him off the hook.
Right. Every link in the chain. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's probably where we're headed. And then again, not confirmed at this point, but I'm curious. We do see Hope Davis, by the way, right, from Your Honor, which we saw here coverage here on the podcast, that she's definitely going to be a bigger part of this. She is this guy's former judge who has some kind of embarrassment that ended his career. And now he's become like a recluse and seemed to be getting himself back on track, but had issues with drugs. So they think this could potentially be an overdose. But you know that just like in Your Honor, she's going to be like somehow involved with some of this conspiracy behind the scenes.
She's great.
And maybe is that her dad who's the old guy who is like kind of like the head of this family? Is that
the
her
charitable foundation guy?
This might be the Epstein connection type thing.
I had that whole reveal was like a little bit too quick for my brain. It was hard to.
She interviews them. I'm focusing on that because I've seen episode 2. She interviews them in episode 2, so that's.
I think
it will come more to the fore over time. But as soon as you see Hope Davis in that like newsreel, you're like, well, she's going to be the main player of the show. I like the detail here, by the way, that when she's at the shelter, she picks her next target. This guy was a lawyer somehow involved in this case, played by, oh man, what's his name? He was in Dying for Sex also. Rob.
I'm not finding him online right away, probably because he's going to be dead soon. But let me see. I think I know who it is, but I can't come up with his name at the moment. Hold on. I'm almost there.
Rob Delaney.
It was on the tip of my tongue.
And that's a perfect example, by the way, just having this guy show up because he has just this kind of affability and he's always funny, but interesting to cast him here. By the way, speaking of the Dying for Sex connection, in that series, and there's interesting synergy here between these two shows. Maybe this was an offshoot of her exploration in that show, because in that case, you had the Michelle Williams character, based on a true story, actually, that she found out she was dying of cancer and that she became a dominatrix to be able to not only have her own sexual fantasies, but to indulge in other people's sexual fantasies. And she ends up having a very sweet relationship with one of her clients, who's played by Rob Delaney, who only gets into this lifestyle like as a way to see her more. And they have a very funny connection in this very strange situation. So as soon as you see Rob Delaney there in this sadomasochistic dynamic, which is actually inverted, it's because she's the dominant one, or at least Catherine is putting herself in that role just temporarily, of course, playing possum there to lure him in, that it's just funny to see that the roles reversed and also to have playing with this BDSM dynamic again. So definitely, I feel like the two shows are in some conversation with each other, although that is a very positive view of that kind of dynamic, where this is obviously, she's calling him out in a way, saying like he's into domination because he secretly is an abuser.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, she's a manipulator too. She is manipulating this girl that runs the shelter to get her papers earlier so she can get this job. But he's kind of onto her as well. I mean, I should say she is onto to her as well, as far as what her game is, but hasn't quite figured out exactly what her overall agenda is. And that's mostly what happens. We see that she has now picked her new target. She's hanging out with Rob Delaney's character, and it's getting creepy. You know that dynamic seems toxic. She's tapping into something. She knows, of course, that he has this tendency. There's some history behind them that he's not aware of or not remembering. And that, of course, is all setting up episode 2, which I won't spoil for you yet, Sona, but things get very interesting between the two of them, as you would expect.
Great.
What else do we see here? So we see this girl. We find out that this woman who did the investigation initially, she plays like she's so jaded, she doesn't care anymore, but she does care. She does some outreach to this girl in the street. This girl ends up dead by the end of the episode. They call up
and you
Alice.
find out it's not that she doesn't care. It's that it's also upsetting that she's purposefully compartmentalizing, because she says, if I play my cards right, I'm not going to remember that girl that got her face busted in with a pipe next week. Right.
Exactly.
So she's very aggressively compartmentalizing so that she can continue with her job.
And of course, this is where they bond initially before she officially becomes part of this investigation, because they called Alice back because she was wearing her jacket, and which Alice donated to her earlier in the show. And they find her card in one of the pockets. So it's tragic, but it does bring them back together on this investigation. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Well, so then
yes.
I think probably it's blurring a little bit for you since you watched 2 episodes, but kind of the tag or whatever at the end of the episode is that then the FBI lady allows Alice to see her files from the investigation of that original drug dealer that died in a similar way, and which are helpfully labeled, I can't remember the drug dealer's name, but files. And I thought, like, that's so funny because never in my computer, like the icon is a file folder. I never label it. So files, like it's a file folder. Those are obviously my files. But anyway.
Maybe these are files specific to that case.
But isn't that the assumption? They have his name on them. So.
Well, the flower, of course. So there's this flower.
Right. So she's watching the video of, I think it's a convenience store, and there's a girl kind of trying to escape, and this guy comes running after her and pulls her down and is carrying her away. And you can see that little flower tattoo. So it connects back to what the neighbor said about when he got flashed and saw her vulva, that she had the flower tattoo. And then I think there's also a scene, of her in bed with Rob Delaney where you see
I think it's intercut there that we see the flower. I do love, by the way, this is like the funniest thing that happens in the show that is pretty sophisticated about us watching the show and like following along. I like the fact that she has the screen has the freeze frame of her where you can see the tattoo, and then she has the picture the kid drew,
right? The drawing, yeah,
puts it next to it, and then we cut to the Rob Delaney's character looking at her body and seeing the flower, and we're like,
little hand holding there,
it's all the same. I'm like, wow, okay, I think we got it, buddy. I think we got it. So, but I guess sometimes you do need to have the clues spoon fed. I think that's a note that came where it's like, you got to do the work for the audience. They're not always paying attention.
Yes, as we've talked about before, and there are times I am grateful for it. This particular time, I would have put 2 and 2 together, but there are times that I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, you could just do a freeze frame on that image on the screen and be like, oh, that's if we didn't know that would be the same person. But I think we know. Now we're confident. So
yeah, we know for sure.
Yes, exactly. So that leaves us with episode 1. I'm glad you reminded me. I didn't know exactly where that ended, so I wanted to make sure I
it's hard to remember. Yeah.
But episode 2 was just as strong as I thought episode 1 was, and I thought episode 1 was very good. So curious to get your take on where you're at with the show. Intrigued, I'm sure. I think probably, and
for sure.
So you're on board for the show.
Yeah, so we have 3 episodes now, and then will it be 1 episode at a time going forward?
Just 1 a week. So we'll be able to take our time in going through this, which I think we probably will need to over time. So we'll, we will, we'll catch up on the remainder of these episodes. I'll get your feedback on episode 2 and 3 and 4 next week. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but we have, but then we will at that point be going week to week.
Well, I want to say, if we can just go back to the episode for a second, and you did touch on this, but I just really love the conversation between Alice and the FBI lady. I will get these names straight at some point about Medusa.
Oh, yes, of course, the Gorgon. Yes.
How it all stemmed from her being raped and the different ways that people dealt with her being raped, with the blame, and then how it affected her. And the thing that she says to Alice is people who are victims of violence, they just become more violent.
They become the most violent, she actually says.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting in laying the groundwork or framework for everyone's perspectives here and their actions.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought it back to that, because I was so caught up in trying to get the plot out of the way that I didn't think about the thematics of it. But of course, it goes back to the very title of the episode, The Gorgon, and this idea, the Gorgons, which, again, we just found this out, were the three sisters, Medusa, one of them. But
right.
The idea that,
just figured that out. Yeah.
Everybody knows. I like how they play this out too, by the way, where Alice is like the one who has snakes in her hair, and she gets corrected. She goes, her hair was snakes. Get it right.
Yeah. And the humor that you talked about like, I'm not like you. I'm not a cop. I went to a fancy private school. I'm very smart.
That's right. And again, exactly what you mentioned, that thematically what's so important here, not only for this episode, but definitely going to be, I think, the theme of the overall show, is this trauma that these two women share. I would presume at this case, it's going to be the reveal here that they both have similar traumas in their past, and then how you deal with it. And again, this very idea that it's easy to say Medusa was a villain, and Medusa is a villain. So clearly, and she is a villain in those old mythological stories, but what made her that thing? Right. And of course, this is like this woman who's out there murdering people, and you'll see she can be pretty ruthless when you see episode 2. And already you can see her ruthlessness and that, but what made her that thing? And of course, broadly, the fact that we all know historically that inevitably when you find out some story of a serial killer, especially women, they say this specifically here, women who are serial killers almost always they come from abusive backgrounds. And I think that's true of all serial killers, by the way, most of the time, not 100% of the time, but almost always. And again, it's like, how do you process that damage? And of course, that hurt people is like a cliche that is true. And that oftentimes these people who are criminals, who are the most antisocial, have deep psychological wounds. And here's these two women who have similar wounds and dealing with them in very different ways, or not. We don't even know exactly we know Alice is not a murderer, that's for sure. But we also know that she's not dealing with her trauma in a healthy way either. Yeah, so I think that for me, the psychology of both characters are fascinating. The relationships between these characters only get more rich and curious in episode 2. Even again, this idea of how the killer is building a strange kind of relationship with her victims. There's an actual relationship that she has a methodology, which is obviously part of her process and part of her psychological working out. And it's interesting and even more developed in that next episode. But yeah, thematically, it's interesting. Characters are interesting. The performers are interesting. We have these parallel investigations. Both of these women have not only are they investigating, one's investigating the other, and the other one is like kind of a mystery that's being unraveled, but they all have their own histories, which are mysteries to us as well. So, I mean, I think this is a lot of interesting elements for a series to explore.
I agree.
And hopefully it will not be as disappointing as Cape Fear. And that's my pitch to remind everybody that we're going to wrap up Cape Fear, everybody. We did it. We made it to the end. And we struck.
I really came around on Cape Fear.
I know, you're still on very favorite. We did another Spotify comment today, by the way, saying that someone saying that I am exclusively hate watching this show. And I'm like, I am not hate watching the show, but I believe that there are plenty of people out there who are hate watching it. I am not hate watching it, but I understand where that person's coming from. But
for sure,
regardless of why you're still watching the show, you may
We're
enjoy
all in it together.
Exactly. It's a shared experience. So whether you think it was pretty good, whether you think it's like campy fun, whether you think it's serious, whether you think it's a disaster and you're watching it because you made it this far and you're just pushing yourself to the end, regardless of why you're watching it, it's ending this week and we'll discuss it. And Darren and I will finally talk about the the show Lucky on Apple TV, which I do recommend. I've been really enjoying that. So we'll be discussing it this week. So expect all those episodes. And of course, I just published the episode where we discussed the Odyssey, speaking of mythological creatures, and the massive hit, by the way. Has your husband any interest in him going to see that?
He hasn't mentioned it, so I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
I'm surprised it was not on his agenda.
Who has that kind of time?
I know. It is a long time. I got to tell you, I went there with I saw it in IMAX, and I usually go late because I assume there's going to be trailers. I'm like, the IMAX sometimes has no trailers. I try to get there on time, but there were credits. So I'm like, there were previews. So I'm like, man, that was like including the drive back home and there, it's like almost a 4-hour. And that's a tough thing to carve out, but it was very good. Just a casual 4 hours.
I'm happy to hear that since you invested so much time.
Yes. A bit 4 hours and terrible, and that would be rough. Is he interested in seeing the new Spider Man movie? That's the other big question.
I think we as a family are interested in seeing the new Spider Man movie. Maybe we'll get there this weekend. I'm not sure what our weekend plans are yet. So
you may have to buy tickets ahead of time because apparently this thing is tracking to make over $300 million over the weekend.
Thank you for that tip, because this is usually the type of thing we figure out a few hours before we go. So that's good to know.
I'm sure all the premium screens are already booked up, but
it seems like it's just going to be super fun.
Oh yeah, I'm a big Spider-Man fan, so I'm very much looking forward to it. Even as these comic book movies have all flopped one after the other, this is like a record opening for Spider-Man. People still love Spider-Man. In every version, they like the Spider-Verse, they like the Spider-Mans, they like the old Spider-Man movies, they like the new Spider-Man movies. People just love Spider-Man.
Can't go wrong with Spider-Man.
I love Spider-Man too. Tom Holland, by the way, and Zendaya are both in the Nolan film. So quite a month for them. Two massive
and they just
movies.
got married, right? So
I don't know. I heard so many times that they were married and they weren't. I don't know where that landed yet.
I'm not super invested. This is, again, facts from me that may not really be facts. I heard they got married. I don't know.
You're a Zendaya truther.
Yeah.
Put that on the back of the t-shirt. All right, Sona. So we will touch base later this week on Cape Fear. And then, of course, next week, we'll pick it up here with another few episodes of Furious. Just us catching up. Only one episode next week, everybody. But we'll be catching up on the next 3 episodes, actually, at that point.
Sounds good.
All right, Sona. Thanks for the
Talk
conversation.
To you soon. Bye.
Okay, so that was my conversation with Sona. I'll be asking her a whole bunch of questions about what happens in episode 2 and 3 before we get into our episode 4 discussion. This will be next week and hopefully earlier in the week. But to wrap up this 3-episode premiere, let me just give you some of the thoughts I had watching the 2nd and 3rd episode of this season. So I'm really glad that Sona brought the conversation back to the title. Titles, I think, are going to be very important in this particular show. We have parsed titles before on other shows we covered here. Sometimes they're more valuable than others. But in this particular case, for sure, seeing the use of the title, the Gorgon, in the first episode, and then the direct reference to Medusa, there's a whole bunch of things that are happening here. For the purposes, it's funny, we just talked about the Odyssey, so people complain about adaptation, but there are definitely versions of the mythology of Medusa where the Gorgons, the 3 sisters, have always been monsters. But Ovid, the poet Ovid's version of this mythology, which is probably the one that we mostly reference back to, which is over 2,000 years old now, I believe, does indeed include this version of the story, perhaps details he added to add some pathos to monster, but regardless, it is the popularized version of this for the last 2 millennia. Indeed, Medusa had beautiful hair, very important. I want to circle back to that. Had beautiful hair, and then was raped by Neptune or Poseidon, depending on which version of the mythology you're following. Both the water gods, just different Roman versus Greek myth. So her hair was the thing that was her most attractive asset. And I think that's very important. Not only does the hair become the snakes, which on the one hand is this curse that makes her hideous rather than beautiful. But of course, she weaponizes it. She becomes a monster and is able to kill using this curse that's been put upon her. So a couple of reasons I want to bring that up is specifically, of course, by the end of 2nd episode, we see that the daughter of this most recent victim has shorn her own hair. And we know that he liked her hair and he wanted his daughter to have this beautiful hair because it attracted men. And of course, he was attracted to women with beautiful hair, women that were, or girls, I should say, in this particular case, around the same age as the daughter. So the daughter cutting off her own hair is very powerful. And honestly, that final moment in episode 2 gave me chills. Just the reveal of it, the way it was photographed, beautifully directed, these 2 episodes of the show. And the impact of it, expecting that perhaps we'll see the daughter dead, only to find out that no, she has survived. And I have a lot more thoughts about that as well. Has shorn her own hair, the thing that her father finds so appealing. So she believed what she was told by Catherine, because maybe in some level has sensed something from her father. So incredibly creepy, but of course, tying back into the Gorgon, the hair being the thing that attracted the sexual assault in the first place, like Medusa. But Medusa then being turned into a monster that seeks vengeance. And of course, that's what Catherine's doing right now. I mean, there's also the whole thing where there's 3 sisters. So maybe Alice, the Emmy Rossum character, is another one of her quote unquote sisters, another Gorgon. And Nora, the FBI agent who now is assisting with the investigation, would be the 3rd sister. Maybe that might be a stretch. I might be stretching it there. Oh, I also find it interesting, of course, that most of the time, I think only when she's doing her OnlyFans, we have actually seen Kat with her wig off. But the fact that she covers her hair, again, is it because the hair was the thing that attracted the assault in the first place? Or is it she's Medusa? She needs to keep her hair hidden because she doesn't want to reveal her true nature. So there's a lot going on there with the mythological symbolism, of course, and all of it hiding in plain sight inside of the title of episode 1. But then episode 2, another very loaded title, My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun. This is the title of an Emily Dickinson poem. And over the course of this episode, we see the metaphor play out that is inside of the poem, but of course, the biography of Emily Dickinson herself. So again, a very weighty, thematic, loaded title. When we open, we see that Kat, playing this Ginny character, is lying down next to Oliver Charles, her next victim. He's getting dressed for work. And of course, this is Rob Delaney, so there is something honestly a little guileless and charming about him. So we don't see him as we can appreciate, I think, at least I can appreciate him a little bit as a victim here, because he obviously did horrible things, but perhaps honestly didn't know how bad they were. But that doesn't really excuse him. But I do think that it allows, in the casting here, again, the casting is doing a lot of this, allowing us to have some sympathy towards this person who's done absolutely monstrous things. And not to excuse those things, but to implicate a broader audience. It's not only the villainous, the monster, the person who's running the sex ring. It's not only the Jeffrey Epstein. We're just going to say the Epstein word. This is taking place in New York City, obviously drawing extreme parallels to the Epstein case. So it's not just Epstein. It's all the people who facilitated him, who looked the other way, who continued to do business with him even after he had been arrested. But even before then, when they knew full well what was happening, or had been blackmailed because they had been caught in a compromising position, intentionally manipulated by Epstein. And then rather than warning everybody else away and letting this toxic word of mouth spread, it was all kept under wraps for such a long time. So I very much think that they don't allow us to have someone who seems somewhat not as villainous as we would expect. It's not just the Epstein figure, but they're showing that this circle of people who facilitated this around him are, if not equally culpable, at least significantly culpable for allowing this to go on for so long. But he's not that innocent. He has her sign an NDA. Why sign an NDA? What are they trying to hide? Of course, he's a public figure, doesn't want things getting out. We've heard this, by the way, many stories like this as this Me Too movement and the post-Epstein times have occurred. We hear famous women who talk about this fact of meeting someone they really admired, and now decades later talking about when the truth has come out about them, that they never talked about it because I had to sign an NDA. You had to sign an NDA to hang out with this person? that is super sketchy, right? So, and we have it represented here explicitly. And she, of course, is playing naive, like, oh, what is this for? Oh, it's to protect me and you. All this lawyer doublespeak here, of course. But she specifically says, I feel like you own me. And she's like, no, that's not the purpose of this. But then she turns it on him. I want you to own me. So she knows, either has a memory of her interactions with him many years before and knows that that will work to appeal to him, or maybe just knows this type of man and knows that domination will be her lure. And of course, his destruction as well. Now, it's important to hang on to that. I'll circle back to it when we get to the actual content of the poem, the Emily Dickinson poem specifically, but the fact that she says, I want you to own me. So Catherine, of course, has gotten into this situation in the first place because she has started a relationship with Becky back at the shelter, helping her get an ID at an accelerated pace, has given her the computer, has noticed in the computer who she's been cyber stalking. All these things mean that Becky is not long for the world, unfortunately for Becky. And now I'm very curious to know why things were so accelerated with Oliver. She very soon thereafter, once she moves in and she has him surveilling her and knows that she's pushing his buttons, she sedates him with an opioid, I believe. And I guess this is this flower. It might be a poppy. Of course, opium comes from a poppy. So interesting that the poppy is now symbolizing her as well. But she now keeps him sedated continuously. It seemed like she was play acting the girlfriend for a longer period of time with the last boyfriend. So she didn't slowly roll it as much, considering that this guy's going to show up for work. It seems like she's got a very short time horizon in which the gig is up, regardless of how everything else plays out in this episode. But of course, things get very complicated when his daughter shows up for a visit. And this is truly scary in watching the film series the first time through this episode, because we really don't know what Catherine's willing to do. Catherine is ruthless when she needs to be and will eventually kill Becky once Becky starts to understand that something really shady is going on, is trying to cut it off. And Kat, very importantly, by the way, Kat wearing a cat mask earlier, just want to shout that out, asks Becky when they meet at the park whether she considers herself a good person. And she's like, no, I don't think I'm a good person, not after this. So I do think that self-judgment actually did potentially push Catherine to actually commit this murder, or maybe she just wanted to hear her say it before she murdered her, because I think Becky knew way too much to live as far as Catherine's concerned. But back to that very threatening dynamic that exists between Myra, the teenage daughter, and Catherine. Catherine saying, "Oh, your dad's such a baby. He's very sick right now." And Myra is the one who's telling her, "Oh yeah, he's such a baby when he's sick." And he, of course, is terrified, although can barely form words at this point. But you can just tell that he is truly terrified with his daughter there, that something horrible is going to happen to her. And perhaps he dies thinking that, which is part of the torment that Kat is trying to inflict. One of the moments in Bonding is this great scene where they're in the bathroom together and Myra wants her hair straightened. And in that moment, I actually thought that maybe Kat was going to burn her hair off because she said that her dad likes her hair to be long, wants her to find a boyfriend. Boys and men like long hair, which of course this triggers in Kat that she's about her age, was about 15 years old when she had her first interaction, this forgotten interaction with Oliver. She burns the back of her neck and she goes, "Oh, excuse me, but I don't have any feeling in my fingertips." Something important, by the way, to consider for not only being able to identify her, but also what was the trauma that caused her to lose sensitivity in her fingertips. She said, "I was injured around the same time, around your age," which of course we also know was around the time that she was sex trafficked with these powerful men. She touches the metal to her fingers. So of course we can actually see that she's not just saying that. But eventually the superintendent shows up, the final moment, shocking final moment. He walks in, finds Oliver's body. The camera pans over, and the shock of it is that Myra's actually alive, but has cut off her own hair. So a couple of really important things. That great scene in the bathroom where they're talking, she's not only curling her hair and talking about the hair and all the symbolism of the hair that we see here, of course, removing it at the end, proving that Myra, however you pronounce her name, was aware of or believed, I should say, what she was told, and maybe even what that might imply, such horrible things. But they also discussed that she is on this debate team. And the debate, the topic had been Emily Dickinson. So Emily Dickinson, her sister actually published her poems after she died. She had only published a few poems in her lifetime, but had, I forget the number, but well over 1,000, maybe 2,000, maybe more poems that she had never published in her lifetime. And of course, now, a century later, one of the most famous and most studied and most revered poets in history, but an archive of creativity, a voice that almost never saw the light of day. So all the levels of this argument, the story of these women, whose story gets told historically, these stories untold. And it makes you think, if her sister had not violated her very will, her will saying, do not publish, burn all my poems, then we would have never seen it. And how many women throughout history, how many poets, how many artists had their art stolen from them or never published or burned up in an attic or rotting away in someone's basement and never seen? It simply is a twist of fate that these poems were published, but importantly, against her will. And of course, this series also explores that idea as well, as like, what is the intention of these women and what is their agency? So if you ask not to have this published, then it is your will. It is a violation to have these works published. However, then we don't have these poems. And specifically this poem, My Life Has Stood a Loaded Gun. And as it opens, my life has stood a loaded gun in corners till a day the owner passed, identified, and carried me away. So the owner carried me away. So let's go back to that first scene in the episode. I want to be owned. So he is the owner picking up the gun, and the gun has just been sitting in the corner, but it is a weapon that can be discharged. And as a matter of fact, if you read the entire poem, it discharges, and she describes it as like a Vesuvian face, I believe it is, like a volcano erupting when the trigger is pulled and kills the other man, the target of the bullet. And at the end, it says, though I than he may longer live, he longer must than I, for I have but the power to kill without the power to die. So first of all, this weapon loaded, just sitting in the corner until someone picked it up and discharged it, is a murderous weapon, but innocuous until used. But second of all, that it can only kill, but does not have the power to die. Now, of course, a person can die. It's very possible that Cat might be dead by the end of the season. But this rage that is inherited from generation to generation, the fury of the title, perhaps never dies. Of course, Alice has stuff to do in this episode too. She is pursuing the killer and starting to piece the case together. So she's looking at these 2 overdose deaths, knowing full well that they're not overdoses. She starts to be pretty confident it's the same killer. We finally see Jake Lacey as her boyfriend Marshall here, and we start to piece together what happened there between them as well. He put her in a hospital. I actually speculated in my conversation with Sona before seeing the 3rd episode that maybe she had some kind of kink, and she was ashamed that even if he had gone too far, that maybe she felt partially culpable. I still think that the partial culpability thing, now that I've seen episode 3, and spoilers for episode 3 here, by the way, but at this point, it seems pretty clear that he definitely transgressed. But at the same time, she does have a sexual kink now associated to violent sex. So it's interesting that perhaps now that we know that she has known Marshall for a very long time, and they were in a relationship when she was a teen, again, a teen who maybe was raped, maybe that sexual assault reprogrammed her in some negative ways, and then and imagine that he was abusing her all the way back then, but she somehow didn't see it as abuse, and then for them to rekindle their relationship later on until things went so far that she ended up in the hospital. So at least she at that point decided it was time to call things off. We also find out that she has been looking at, I didn't understand this, I guess she had been, I don't even know if I have come up with this on my own or if it's in the film, the series, or whether it's my own conjecture, but she's afraid of taking a shower. And then I wondered if she had been imprisoned in the shower. But Danny trying his absolute best to be the best friend he can be to her, sits with her in the shower while she takes a shower. The Danny relationship with Alice is very interesting because I do start to wonder now if there is perhaps an attraction between them that has been, maybe they got friend zoned over time, or maybe it's because she was in the police department. So maybe they're no longer on a romantic trajectory, but maybe there was at some point the possibility of this. And now they've ended up in a platonic situation because, again, jumping to episode 3, there is this anger when Marshall finally flips and shows his true colors, that he basically tells her, not that she accuses her of having had sex with Danny, but saying that they should have just had sex, because it's as if this bond they have is more of an obstacle to their relationship, as if he's got to get back together with her. I mean, he's definitely trying to win her back. And I'll save that conversation for our breakdown of episode 3, because that's the really fascinating dynamic that plays out between the two of them. Is we see the abuser, who's probably a pattern we've seen before, the luring in, the softness, the saying the right things, the showing the concern, the honesty of it. Like maybe he's convinced himself that he really wants her back. Now, if that also allows all these nasty rumors to go away, then great. But it's almost like this self-delusion, which of course, again, that moment where he's like, I feel sick seeing this woman beat up. Was I ever like that to you? This is all in episode 3, but I kind of jumped ahead. But I couldn't help but talk about it because it's really fascinating to see this kind of dynamic played out. And we understand in seeing it that this is the pattern they've been in multiple times. And at first we're like, maybe he really has changed. As viewers, this is fascinating, I think, really, from a structural, script writing standpoint, that we as viewers have, or I did anyway, have this empathy toward maybe things went too far. Maybe he's really apologetic, only for him to flip that switch at the end. And then of course you realize, oh, I fell for the same thing that the victims fall for all the time, that the nice face before you get the back of the hand. As a big digression, but wanted to mention the whole Danny relationship with Alice and how that's a really nice relationship. And all their scenes are terrific together. I really like the comedy of this here and there. I like Nora, great character, by the way. I haven't even barely mentioned her, but a terrific character here, the Nora character, great performance as well. This very jaded FBI agent that little by little is starting to be a human being again. She's been abused by the job itself and maybe in the past, but she actually, in her own grim tone, injects a lot of comedy in here, mostly in her interactions with folks. But I do love how she makes fun of how Irish Danny's name is, and he responds with, I just shit out a potato earlier. Another great Scoop McNairy moment here earlier on is when Alice was accusing him of maybe just trying to be good with the boys back at the squad. Maybe you were even looking the other way while these guys were getting hand jobs at the massage parlor. Maybe you were one of them. And he says, are you accusing me of getting hand jobs from teenage girls? And he says, I didn't even get hand jobs from teenage girls when I was a teenage boy, which made me laugh out loud. But we also get a really great moment here, which I teased in my conversation with Sona, where you really see the hurt that Danny immediately took her side, despite the fact that she's now just angrily turning on everybody who has wronged her in some way, or just she believes they might be wronging her. And he's really hurt that he did take her side. She immediately took her side. That immediately alienated him from everybody else in the force. And simultaneously, she, for many reasons, started to distance herself from him as well. So really leaving him on an island all his own. All right, episode 3 has the least plot, but the most character work, I think, and great moments all the way through. It's called Memory Distortion, and interesting when you start thinking about how memory distorts everything. Maybe it distorts the abuse from before, but maybe it obfuscates it as well. And of course, there's this question as to whether Mira has truly lost all of her memory of the trauma of the night before during this interrogation. Alice does a really good job of knowing how to push her to get her to respond, while her mom obviously is being very protective of her. And they had this really tender moment earlier on when she actually shows up at the crime scene and puts a blanket on her. And of course, later on, able to discuss or interrogate her about, was there anything she could remember, any information about the cat, or Ginny as she knew her. Of course, all the way before we get to that, very importantly, I should mention this, that as we expected, that Marshall, Jake Lacey character, and her ex-boyfriend, the abusive ex-boyfriend, is now on the case. And now they have to work together. She hyperventilates at the beginning. Nora takes her aside and says, can you do this or not? I don't want to take you off the case. And she mostly holds it together for the rest of the episode. And surprisingly, considering how rough some of these interactions are, especially when we get to the whole moms thing. And now, of course, we are fully into the plot mechanics of the rest of the season. We have a joint FBI NYPD task force. Now, these two exes who she's intentionally been working as far away as possible from his backyard. They are now on the same case together, considering these two disparate murders are actually connected. She has convinced them that these connected crimes, and of course, that has only brought them closer together. Oh, every interaction with her boss, by the way, the FBI boss is just like, you got what you wanted. You convinced them this case. It's like the case is connected. Okay, there you go. As if she was the one who requested the investigation in the first place. But we do have some somewhat stereotypical, but nonetheless entertaining comedy here where we see Marshall and Choi, his partner, are like, we got a lead. We found this Ginny character. We're going to go arrest her right now. And of course, it turns out to be the actual Ginny who lost her bag. And then Alice at no point seems to be interested at all in pursuing this lead because she knew full well that this woman was not operating under her own ID. She does start to reach out to all the shelters, does eventually find somebody with Ginny's name, of course. And that eventually leads to the discovery that Becky's been murdered. And then, of course, we're approaching the middle of this season, considering we're 3 episodes in already, and we have this kind of fascinating reveal. I really love when you have these type of crime shows and you start to see that. I really like when you get to see the criminal in their mundane life, because oftentimes with a thriller, you see everything from the perspective of just the cat and mouse chase, and the killer's like super powered or just pops up conveniently when the plot requires it, or just kills somebody and leaves a breadcrumb behind of clues. But I really do like when you get to see, like, what is this person like on a day-to-day basis? How are they out there operating and don't get caught? Like, are they just pure sociopaths? And we have seen repeatedly how Kat is able to survive. And of course, huge reveal here that she is now living in the home with one of her patients. She's taken some time off because she said her mom was sick, I believe, but she's actually been out murdering. She just takes some time off when she needs to. So I assume she's getting a paycheck doing this care work, and she has an OnlyFans as well. One creepy, straight up serial killer aspect of this is her bedazzled shrine to the people she's killed. There's something, I don't know when she started making these shrines. She must have started, maybe this speaks to Arrested Development or something, but super creepy. I don't like seeing these bedazzled pictures of her murder victims. But the most fascinating aspect of this is not only that she is, again, hiding in plain sight, has a job, living in the patient's house. So anyone curious enough to pull any one of these individual threads long enough will unravel this whole thing. But these are people who are she is just one of these people who's learned to hide in plain sight. They specifically say this when you are, something I wasn't aware of, but when you're sex trafficked, you get taught, like, how do you get yourself out of these situations? How do you hide in plain sight so that you can disappear and reappear when necessary? And of course, she's learning, or I should say she's using what she learned in that position with no power of being this trafficked person to now become a killer using the exact same skills. So again, this is like the Medusa hair, right? The thing that is supposedly your curse is actually what you use as a weapon eventually. And as I mentioned, we see her without the wig. I think it's the first time we've seen her without the wig. I think she's always been wearing the red wig or a wig almost every time we've seen her. This is the first time we see her without it. So this domestic situation is actually really shocking, surprising. And most of all, this very tender relationship she has with this severely disabled character, Aiden, this actor giving a really fantastic performance, by the way. But the fact that she can flirt with him, she can be sexual with him because she has full control over the relationship. He does ogle her. There is a sexual component to their relationship, but it's completely safe. And it's really powerful to just consider that this woman who has been sexually abused throughout her life to now be able to have a home where she's performing OnlyFans and is using her sexual wiles to have this home and live there on her own because her patron is so debilitated. So it's like a really symbiotic relationship that she can safely be within. And it allows her to be tender with him. And of course, she also has learned to be excellent at injecting this syringe of fentanyl. So I guess this explains how she has such a good and precise understanding of what dosage will not kill somebody. We were curious about that in our conversation, Sona and I. So perhaps she has a lot of experience specifically because of what we see here. She does catch him snooping in that room, though, and hopefully Aiden is not on the chopping block. And then some other key elements start falling into place here as well. Finally, of course, we do have that scene that I already briefly discussed where Alice is trying to question the daughter. At first, she says she doesn't know anything, then slowly starts talking about Catherine, and eventually says, I'm supposed to give this to you, meaning the cops. But it's interesting that she specifically says you. I think it's supposed to instruct us as the watchers that there is now a communication between these two women directly. And there's a photograph of a girl in there, and there's also this man who runs this organization, the one that we saw in the TV appearance with Hope Davis last week, the father of her first victim here on the show. And this is where we start to overtly start seeing this is a cabal of interconnected rich men. This is very much the Epstein type story. And I believe this girl in the photograph, which now of course is overtly being passed from the killer to the police, she knows they're closing in on her. She left Mira alive to tell them something. I killed people who I think are in my way, but I didn't kill her because I wanted her to deliver us to you. So she doesn't mind that they're on her heels, because what she's trying to do now, it seems to be, is to pull them into this investigation, this broader investigation, so that pursuing her unravels this bigger conspiracy. And we also see another thread here that is definitely going to pay off. She's tracking down this girl, Elena, who's now doing sex work as well. She ends up getting beaten up by her pimp. She's angry to find out that she's living with these girls again. She's back in the same situation that she was trying to get her out of, but still feeling this guilt because apparently the girl in the photograph is indeed dead, and it is Elena's sister. So all of this is vengeance for the death of that girl. So horrible things happened to her for years, and she accepted that. But somehow this was a bridge too far. And now we have this really fascinating, not only these kind of mysteries in the show working in parallel as to like, who is this person? What are their past traumas? Maybe their past histories even intersect in some ways, or at least parallel each other. But of course, now this investigation is moving forward in both directions. Now, breadcrumbs being left behind for Alice to go through the looking glass. I'm going to throw as many different references in here as possible and discover that these very powerful and very upstanding, supposedly, citizens are actually all corrupt and tied into this broader sex trafficking conspiracy. But of course, that's not where the episode ends. This is another really fascinating element of this show that already is tantalizing as it is. Marshall, the Jake Lacey character, tells Alice that she should go visit his mom, who's very sick. And then we start to find out this backstory between them. Her mom was not around, so this woman was either a neighbor who helped out or officially an actual foster parent of some kind, was her mother figure. And it starts off this very tender reconnection with her and then turns it on her. You have to save my son. He won't get a promotion. It gets so petty in her explanation. He won't get a promotion. If people believe this is true, please get back with him. It's the only thing I ask before I die, or whatever, this kind of guilt trip she puts on her. And then things start to click in our minds as well as viewers that this is a pattern, right? This kind of the gentle and then the manipulative is exactly what we saw play out between Marshall and her. So this is something that's multi-generational, as oftentimes abuse is. And it's just fascinating to see that in some ways you can start to already psychologize all of this. Alice was groomed in a way to expect that type of relationship by the mom and then by her son as well. And then, of course, we see Marshall's true colors, where he's like apologizing. I want you back. I still love you. You have to do it. And it's so funny to see him spinning out in those moments. Not funny, comedic, but funny, ironic. He is trying to be gentle and tough at the same time. And it's not working. It's just, he's just trying everything at the same time. But like I mentioned, I do find it fascinating in this performance, this revelation that perhaps he himself does not see himself as the monster that he is. Because the first person he has to convince is himself, and then it's easier to convince her in that way. But she seems to not be having it anymore. She does escape by the end of the episode. Not quite like the cliffhanger that the first two episodes had. I actually thought that as a hook for what's going to happen next, that was much more of like a very satisfying character beat, which I do appreciate, by the way, but wasn't really the kind of big hook like, oh, what's going to happen next? But that's fine, by the way, because there are tantalizing mysteries here throughout. One of them, of course, she's leaving these breadcrumbs. How is she going to be able to work as the Dragnet Titans? How will she continue to operate? And is this some kind of death run for the cat character herself? Or does she somehow think she can escape this by the end? I am curious to know what the judgment was to allow her to kill Becky. Becky obviously knew too much, but arguably so does Mira, and they could have left the photograph there regardless. But again, maybe it's all intentional. She probably didn't want to kill this girl who she probably related to like an alternate version of herself, who she could have been without this trauma. Or maybe she's fine with them finding out a little bit more about how she appears or how she moves and operates, because she does want them a little closer, because the closer they get, the higher profile the crime becomes, the less they can cover it up like they have in the past. And I do think this is an acceleration. And I think next week we're going to know who the next victim is, who's that new bedazzled figure in her box, and this new character she's creating to ensnare them. So that's a whole bunch of thoughts. I hope that was coherent on these second and third episode. A lot of these things I want to run by Sona when we meet again. And hopefully we'll be able to run through a bunch of that stuff pretty quickly and then break down episode 4. And then, of course, week to week beyond that. For 8 episodes, I think, total. So relatively quick work through. We'll be halfway through after just next week. So I do hope you're watching this show. This is a good one, I think. Really interesting. Critics have seen more of this show than I have, and word of mouth is positive from the critics at least. And it seems to be audiences are engaged with it as well. So I'm definitely intrigued, and not only by the thriller aspects of it, fascinated by these characters. I think the writing's really sharp. I think the visuals are very impressive. I really found the cinematography beautiful especially the first episode. So very intrigued by all of this whole package, and we will be covering it week to week. And of course, again, reminder, in just about a day, Darren and I will be talking about Another Woman on the Run in another thriller, Lucky. Very different tone there, but also about a girl who was probably groomed at an early age to be very good at evading capture for different reasons. And of course, on Friday or Saturday, depends on where we can get around to it, expect an episode drop on the latest episode of Cape Fear. Thank God, the last episode of Cape Fear. All right, thanks, everybody, and I will talk to you soon.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.